But going back to the Madison Avenue, where a lot of these guys hit that strike price of like 500 or so a foot, stepped in, started building out stores, and now the most recent deal I heard, a store just paid 1250 a foot. That's 1,000. That's 1,250.
Oh, I don't see how they make New York City retail. What do we got? How are we looking out there? You know, I see in the news every day that it's great. Everything is going great in New York City. Retail's filling up, and then I'll read an article in Globe Street or Biz Now. No, it's not so great. So I want to go right to the man, the myth, and
Uh,
what's happening in New York City on retail.
I think broadly speaking, it's very, very good.
Yeah,
I'm not sure where the negative stories are coming out from these
yeah,
days. Um, but on a retail level, spaces are being occupied, leases are being signed, things are under construction. The one glaring negativity that we're dealing with here, which you're seeing in a lot of the big cities, is some of the crime and some of the exaggerated immigrant population influx, if you will. So it's
okay,
a challenge. Some of the crime it remains a challenge.
okay,
But we're not giving up. We're not this city's not giving up. I mean, I hear awful things out of San Francisco.
yeah,
We're nowhere near that. And some of the doomsdayers or doomsayers or whatever you want to call them will talk about us heading in that direction. Um, we're not that bad. We're rough, but we know how
right,
to deal with it. But
yeah,
across the board, if you break the city up, the city gets very segmented
yeah,
into sub markets, and the three areas that jump back first after COVID, SoHo, the meatpacking district, Times Square, mostly because it's tourist driven and the tourists are back in full effect here in the city. Uh, excuse me. That said, the Upper East Side, where most of the people live, very strong. The East Village, very strong. The glaring negative is the what I call the box that is Midtown Manhattan. So if
okay,
you go 23rd Street, call it 23rd Street to 57th Street, 3rd Avenue to 8th Avenue or so, which is the dominant office market of the city, Midtown
yeah,
Manhattan. There, and the financial district downtown are the two areas that have really been slow and sluggish to get back because the people aren't back, in full effect. We
sure,
have the numbers they talk about, and they move depending on who you ask. First and foremost, it's a 4-day work week at best, and I think that's going to hold forever. And I say at best because I think there's a fair amount of companies that still say 3.5 in
right,
terms of who's coming into the office on Mondays, but Fridays, forget about it. Um, the body count, the occupancy count, whatever you want to call it, is up to about 65-70%. Again, depending on who you ask,
okay,
what metric you use for your data. But it's still somewhat sluggish in Midtown, and that hurts. It hurts the foodies that are all around that service all the employees around
mhm,
around Midtown. So that will work itself out. It's going to take a little more time than anyone anticipated. But the people that aren't coming to work and they're staying home on the Upper East Side and the Upper West Side and Murray Hill and all of those places, the retailers there are thriving. That's number one,
right,
and number two, our luxury market, and not we don't own it, right? The luxury market
sure,
across the country is booming. The luxury shopper, the luxury consumer,
hmm,
they're not affected by
right, of course,
interest rates and inflation and things like that. And the brands know that. I think the brands uh, just waited around for a strike price because the rents did come down for COVID.
sure,
They
yeah,
settled. They settled, and those that dove in early in what we call our Gold Coast here in New York, in Manhattan, on Madison Avenue, 57th to 72nd Street, uh, they floored at about 400 or 500 a foot. And I know that's sort of hard to swallow for most, that's a bargain, but that's a bargain.
Yeah, it is. Isn't your core in your retail quarters? You're about 638 a foot now.
Yeah,
That's what I
it's
heard.
about that. Sometimes the average is taken from certain segments of
Right.
the market, but that's the vicinity. Believe me, but there's plenty of places around the neighborhoods that again, and I know you have a lot of listeners and a lot of followers, Joe. But around the city, if you're doing deals at 100 and $150 a square foot in the neighborhoods, that's good.
Yeah.
That's a workable rent considering the density. Uh, but going back to the Madison Avenue, where a lot of these guys hit that strike price of like 500 or so a foot, stepped in, started building out stores, and now the most recent deal I heard, a store just paid 1250 a foot. That's 1,000. That's 1,250.
Oh, I don't see how they make.
Well, it's branding and marketing, and we know
Sure.
what that's all about. And these guys got to do that.
Oh yeah.
And so you've crept back to some pre-pandemic levels in that area.
Yeah.
LVMH, excuse me, which we all know the biggest retailer in the whole wide world. Uh, they see this market just getting better. They have a flagship store in a building they own on the corner of 57th and 5th, which you can't get any more prime than that.
Yeah.
And they recently announced they're going to move out for 5 years. They're going to go across the street in a temporary location because of some of the upzoning here in New York, and they're going to tear that building down along with the building next door and build something 3 times the size, an LVMH tower. So they certainly believe in the city as well.
I think a lot of people are really hoping to see it get back. I mean, it's really a shame what you're seeing in San Francisco. Hopefully, they can figure that out. But now, is the total square footage of retail from last year? You've declined, right? You don't have as much retail available right now, correct? You've been leasing at a
Absolutely,
pretty good pace.
yeah, the absorption has been pretty good for the last 12, 16 months for sure.
And who are the most common tenants looking right now? Is it mom and pops, national credit tenants? Who is it? Or a
I
mixture
would
of
I would
both, I'm sure. But
it's always a mix. I would
yeah,
say that with respect to some of the areas we talked about, luxury has been pushing hard
yeah,
to reposition themselves. Some of them have been here before. Some of them are increasing their footprint. There are some new brands. I don't play in that arena all that often, so there's some brands that I'm not familiar with.
sure.
Even the ones where my wife may shop, I'm not that familiar with them.
You
but
can't go
but
shopping with her?
right, but they're here. They're here. I
Sure.
would say that consistently throughout this. The food operators, a small plug. We represent Panda Express here in the New York City market, and we've been growing. We've been trying to do our best to grow like a weed, taking advantage of some opportunity, um, raising canes.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
everywhere.
they've taken their first steps into the New York metro market. They probably, I think it's next week, they open up their flagship in Times Square,
No.
and I know just being in the market, they probably have about 7 or 8 other leases signed, so they'll be coming down the pike. And of course, you can't have a retail conversation almost anywhere these days without talking about cannabis.
Yeah,
So we have this proliferation, unfortunately, of illegal operators. We have
yeah,
we have a handful of legal operators, and
right.
then there's the other.
Yeah, we're seeing
Uh,
that in LA as well. The illegals are popping up all over the place again.
yeah,
They'll go 2 doors down.
yeah, we have the same thing. We have the
Yeah,
same thing, and part of that is, and it certainly depends on what position you take all the time, is they tend to be in smaller buildings, right? The
sure.
bigger, more sophisticated landlord's not signing that guy, and
Hmm.
so they're in the smaller buildings, and so that landlord, and remember, landlords usually get the least amount of sympathy from the marketplace, right? They're the
Sure.
big bad. Oh, you own a property, you must be rich. And the fact of the matter is the market's made up of more mom and pop landlords than there are institutions. And so that guy who really got hurt during COVID because he has nobody paying him any rent, gets a guy who's coming in, and it's legal to sell, CBD and those products, and they sign a lease with somebody who's going to do that. The fact that that tenant then goes ahead and does illegal things is not the landlord's fault.
Yeah, we're actually going through that just yesterday. Client moved in, and it's just the story you told. All of a sudden, there's all kind of equipment coming in. You're like, wait a second, this isn't consistent with what you were talking about. What's going on here?
Right.
And we haven't heard back from the guy yet. So our client's freaking out a little bit.
Yeah, well, there's going to be, it depends on where you sit, and it's going to be some fun for some lawyers at some point. But I know that every lease, excuse me, every single lease in this city, it's in the boilerplate. No illegal activities, no illegal sales of anything, and that's there.
Sure.
What they choose to do after the fact, can't help that sometimes.
Yeah, it's an issue. Hopefully we'll get it worked out soon. What are you seeing with concessions? You getting some good concessions, or are they tightening up on that as well?
We tightened up pretty hard here in New York, pretty quick. The New York City landlord is great.
Yeah.
On April 1st, 2021. Okay, that's a historic date because that was the date they approved the vaccination. All right. Yep. So I had some of my landlord friends on April 1st flip a switch and say, now it's our world again.
Taking it back, huh?
That's it. So from that point forward, every deal started to get less and less concession driven. And so, clearly the stronger tenants get the benefit, and they get more from landlords and things like that. But it's been dissipating, and concessions. Yeah.
It's been something. I know your tourism. I was reading an article, I think last night. Your tourism now is up 12.2% from last year. So people are coming.
And that gets us, being up from last year is great, but the new numbers get us close to pre-pandemic levels. So we're pretty solid.
Yeah, and all your restaurants. I was talking to Kyle and Sarah, your sidekick there.
My sidekick,
Zelnik. And was he in the office today? Probably not, right?
Nah, come on.
Probably
it's raining. It's raining.
Yeah. Yeah. He gets hair wet. Oh, wait a second. He's bald.
Very good. Very good.
Yeah. It seems like he's busy all the time. So it seems like a lot of good news out of New York on the retail side. Office is still struggling, in some areas.
Office is going to struggle a lot. The discussion in New York on a regular basis now is how do we convert, how do they convert some of these offices to residential? Mm-hmm. I spoke about this earlier in the week. The fact of the matter is, you can't just snap your fingers and say, okay, we're going to call it a residential building from a physical perspective. Right. First, you need, the governor to sign off on a zoning change, and then allow them to do it. But, when it comes to floor plates, you look at huge floor plates and elevator core, and not to get sort of too inside baseball, but you can't do those things. There are laws. You have to have air and light into all the apartments.
Sure, yeah.
And so the inside apartments, you got no air and light. So unless somebody changes the rules, it's a problem. And what's going to happen is that more likely than not, to convert these apartments or these office buildings into apartments, you probably have to knock down a bunch of them.
Yeah, I think so too. How long do you think, and this is, I know you don't do a lot of office, but to turn it around with office there in the city, how many years do you think it's going to take?
I think what's going to happen is it's probably going to take another 3-5 years for it to really, really turn around. But I think, and that turnaround is going to be on a smaller scale, because I think that the work, I don't know how we're ever going to get the work from home stuff out of people's brains. They're just comfortable with it, and certain companies are comfortable with people being that way. So they're not going to need as much
productivity, and the people are being productive, then
that's right.
Less traffic for us.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
But it's measuring the productivity, and in the middle of all this, I was talking to companies who go, our productivity is way down, but reports were saying it was way up, so you didn't know who to believe. But yeah, I think it's going to be a few years, probably 4 or 5 years before you guys start seeing a good solid turnaround.
Yep.
But you guys are on the path, pretty
Well,
steep path to back to normal.
Joe, we're fucking New York, man. Nothing. We this is what we do. We deal with shit, and we
Yeah.
figure it out, and we go forward.
Yeah, we need to ship a bunch of you guys to San Francisco and get that turned around up there for those folks.
I'm not coming there, my friend. I'm not
I
coming there.
don't blame you. It's going to be a lot. Well, Cory, thank you very much. Now, tell us a little bit. How do people get hold of you?
How do you find me? You can
How do
find
you
me
find
on my. You can find me on my Instagram handle, which is under my name, Cory Zelnik, or on the company handle, which is Zelnik Co. You can hit us up on our website, LinkedIn, all the good places. And every now and again, I appear on WABC 77 radio, and you can find me there and Sid and Friends in the morning.
You got the voice for radio. Perfect.
Thanks. I have a face for. Joe. I have a face for radio.
Face for radio. Okay. Well, I didn't want to give you a cut down because you're kind enough to come on here. The biggest celebrity I got. You're everywhere.
Please.
You
it's
and
my
Kyle.
pleasure.
I'm going to put all your information down below so everybody can go find it there. They don't have to write it down. For those of you watching, I hope you enjoyed it with Cory. Do reach out to him if you want to know anything about New York. And if you could, please give us a like. And if you could, also give us a subscribe.